Hello, and welcome to the 14th episode of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And today we're talking about knowledge, medieval knowledge. So basically what can be known and what can't be known, and the differences between faith and reason.
Yes, and opinion.
And opinion. Opinion's in there a little bit.
Yeah.
We have unlimited amounts of those.
I don't know. I'm starting to get drained.
I
I think I've hit my limit.
You've hit your limit of opinions?
No, I haven't hit my limit. But there is a limit, I guess.
I guess. So, starting off with Augustine on skepticism, faith, and knowledge. And so, a lot of what Augustine does in this little section of the reading is he really kind of combats skepticism. And so, skepticism is kind of the belief that we really can't know all that much. There's not much to be known that we can really tell. And so...
And also, that's your most hated philosophical position.
The easy way out that doesn't really accomplish much.
I don't know if it's the easy way out.
I think it is, because with any argument... Basically, you can boil it down to a skeptic argument if you try hard enough.
Seems like you'd be working hard at not knowing.
I feel like it's just an infuriating way to spend your time.
Agreed. All right, moving right along.
So Augustine says that we know logical truths. So things such as if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. That's not really something that you can combat. We also know that appearances cannot be argued against. So basically, people's matter of opinion in a way. So if I say something like, that wall appears gray to me, you cannot say, no, it doesn't. Because, well, that's something that appears that way to me. You can't combat when I say something like that.
And that I categorically disagree with.
How so?
Because opinions can be wrong. I don't know why you did not anticipate that I'd be opposed to.
But if it's an observation about something that you see.
Yeah, and your observation is wrong.
Yes, I forgot that this is your line of thought. Yes,
it's not always wrong, but sometimes it's wrong.
Yeah,
because that's not gray; it's a light gray.
And for a guy who hates semantics so much, you really got into it there.
No, but I think a person's perception can be wrong. Like that's beautiful.
Yeah,
because sometimes it's just not.
Things that which there's
all of a sudden I feel a lot louder.
You're not?
No? Okay, good.
Okay. I don't know. Maybe our listeners,
if dominating,
they want to tell us if you are louder, they can follow us on Twitter and comment that to us at Unlimited Opinions, capital ULMTD, capital O Opinions.
At some point, we're going to have to give a prize to the first person who tweets us.
Yes.
First listener to tweet anything, we're going to have to send them a prize.
We'll PayPal you $5.
No, not cash.
What else would we give as a prize?
We'll come up with something.
Okay.
Or, we can get, maybe I should design a t-shirt or something for Unlimited Opinions.
Sure. And
then we can have them at the ready and give them out as weekly prizes.
Weekly prizes?
Yeah, for like the most clever tweet
to us.
To our Twitter account.
If anybody would actually want a shirt about Unlimited Opinions.
And the funny thing is, if we just have one listener that tweets anything, that would be the most clever tweet for the week.
It would.
That person would just accumulate t-shirts at our expense.
Unfortunately, yeah. So
I like that idea.
Our
work on that.
Lucky listeners out there, tweet us. You will, I guess, get a t-shirt.
Yeah, you'll have to send us your address.
That was really creepy.
Well, I mean, they will have to, because I'll have to send them a shirt.
Well, I know, but the way you kind of just segued like blankly into that and just...
Well, I was just thinking the practical side of it. I have, for number one, I have to buy the shirt. I have to design the shirt.
Yes.
We have to order the shirts.
Yes.
Then we have to award the prize.
And we'll need their address.
I need your address. And your the clothing that you're wearing. I need a description of your clothing.
All right. Anyway, back to Augustine.
Where are we at anyway?
We were talking about appearances and
how they can be wrong.
Yes.
But he says they can be they are right.
Yes.
Because they're basically opinion or
perceptions. I guess. Yes. And so then he also says that senses can be erroneous, but the mind cannot be disproven. So statements such as "I am alive," you cannot disprove that if somebody says that I am alive, because that's a concept of the mind and not necessarily something that you perceive. It is just something that you know within you. Yes or no? Any comments on that one?
I don't. I guess they can believe that they're alive, but really they're a figment of my imagination.
Fair enough, I guess.
So I mean, I can in my own mind I can refute it, I guess, or I can not believe it.
But Augustine actually kind of counteracts that, because if he says that if we do not exist, we cannot err. Because for something that does not exist, there's no way for it to err if it does not actually exist. So kind of in our error, we are proving that we exist.
Yeah, I exist. I could be wrong about you claiming to be right or existence. Interesting.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, when you really... Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, I can prove to myself that I exist.
Yes.
Even if I'm wrong about my claims, I have to exist to be wrong about my claims.
Yes.
But you don't have to... When I'm listening to you, you don't have to exist.
I guess that's true.
Hey, I could have just created you.
That's a scary thought.
Well, I kind of did, actually. Almost 18 years ago.
Yes. In 3 months, actually. Almost exactly.
Don't give out your date of birth
I guess
over
that's
our
true.
podcast.
Oh, yeah. My bad. All right. He also says
There's
that...
stalkers out there.
Yeah. Augustine also points out...
Although I think your mother will probably post pictures of you on your birthday.
Oh, absolutely.
Giving your age, address, location, and date of birth.
So at some point, it's kind of a moot point.
Yes.
Yes. He also says that information comes from our senses and from others. So it's also like from things that we perceive, and then we don't actually have to perceive those things to know that they are true. For example, he points to, the ocean exists, and someone who has never seen the ocean can believe that it exists because other people have said so. And actually, that was a point that was made in my psychology class a little bit ago, as one of the main things that differentiates humans from all other forms of life is that we do not actually have to experience something to know about it.
How do we know that other animals don't know things that they have not yet experienced?
That is a good question.
Well, I mean, there are birds that migrate.
Yeah.
How do you know they don't go back home? Like there's geese that stay in the Festus City Park year round because people feed them.
Yeah.
I wonder if their buddies say, it's not that worth the trip. Maybe they say, it's not worth the trip. Don't go down there. And they say, I'm not going on that 300-mile, no, it'd be more than that, several 100-mile journey. If you say it's not worth it, I agree with you. I know that now. Can a bird know that?
I don't know. You'll have to ask one.
Yeah. And by the way, I have a theory. If I share my theory about why anyone would get a degree in psychiatry or psychology, a bachelor's degree in psychology,
no,
and then go on to any sort of counseling or psychiatric
you have
career.
not told me about this.
I've not shared this.
No, you've never shared this.
No exceptions. This is Mark's general rule of psychiatrists. It applies to every one of them. They all got into the field of study because they took Psychology 101 as an elective, and they started reading the books and being introduced to these concepts of mental illness, and they realized, that's what's wrong with me. And then they really got into it because, oh my gosh, there's a term for this. This is what's wrong with me. Mm-hmm. And they study it and study it and study it, and they get a doctorate, and then they're out there telling us how to live our lives.
It's a
Mark's general rule of psychology.
Big talk from philosophy major.
Truth.
All right. And then Augustine also says...
Have you ever met a normal psychologist or psychiatrist?
I don't know.
And our listener out there is nodding his or her head, going, nope.
I don't think I've ever met a psychologist.
You'd remember it.
So for that, on our tally of people that we have alienated from our podcast, we can add psychologists.
Who else have we alienated? I know there's a couple.
I think the Macedonians, the Greeks.
Oh, yes.
Pro-choice people.
Pro-choice people,
yes.
for sure.
Yes. But anyway, like I was saying, Augustine also says that true knowledge of the essences of things cannot come from the senses. So he says here, my eyes say, if they are colored, we told you of them. My ears say, if they made a noise, we passed it on. My nose says, if they had a smell, they came my way. My mouth says, if they have no taste, don't ask me. Touch says, if it is not bodily, I had no contact with it, and so I had nothing to say. The same holds of the numbers of arithmetic. They have no color or odor, give out no sound, and cannot be tasted or touched. The geometer's line is quite different from a line in an architect's blueprint, even if that is drawn thinner than the threads of a spider's web. Yet I have in my mind ideas of pure numbers and geometrical lines. Where have they come from? So he makes a good point here about those are some things that, we cannot perceive, right? We cannot, it's not something that we really see. We do not, see the number 4, but we do have knowledge of what the number 4 is.
Yeah, they're intellectual concepts.
Yes.
That's right.
And he says these intellectual concepts are really come from God, and that's something that he talks about a little later here.
Is that the intelligible realities? Is that what we're talking about, or is that
Yes.
incorporeal? Eternal reasons.
Those are the
I got a little turned around with his terms.
That's all within the same thing. So intelligible realities are unchangeable standards of judgment, such as the perfect circle. So this is similar to Plato's theory of ideas. So like there's, we know what a perfect circle looks like. We can visualize it, even though we have never seen a perfect circle because it's impossible for it to exist in the world. And so that's kind of what, Plato's ideas were about, is that they are the perfect concepts of things that we have in our world. But Augustine kind of throws aside that these perfect things actually exist somewhere, and they actually only exist in the mind of God. And that is where we kind of get this understanding of these perfect concepts.
Okay. That's a good explanation.
Thank you.
Yeah. What do you think of St. Augustine?
Well, there's still divine illumination.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, keep going, and then we'll get your opinion.
So Augustine on divine illumination. So
basically, God's imprinted it upon us, and we're just kind of revealing. Our reason is bringing out the universal concept.
Yeah, in a way. I really like this idea, actually. We talked about this briefly in 3 episodes ago, I think. So illumination is the medium by which we understand, and this comes from God. So he's kind of saying, like, for us to understand, the essences of these perfect things that exist in God's mind, they have to be lit up for us, because we cannot perceive them by merit of our own, intellect and reason. And it is through this light, this divine light that comes from God, it shines not on the objects, but on our own eyes of reason. And that allows us to look at these things and understand their concepts.
Kind of like inspired by God type knowledge, I guess.
Yes. In a way. Actually, exactly like that. I don't know why I said it in a way. Then he also
in a very big way. The way.
The way,
There's only one way.
There's only one way. Yes.
In a way.
Yes. The way, the truth, and the life.
There you go.
And so he also defines faith here as thinking with assent. So really,
not a smell, but a scent. One word, not 2 words. Not a scent.
Yes.
Assent. Yes. Thinking with agreement.
Yes.
Or yes. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so. So it's really, thinking about a concept of God is, agreeing with, certain, self-evident truths that we have to kind of hold in belief, agree with these things that we can't necessarily prove by our own reason.
Yeah. I like this quote towards the end. I don't know if this is time to mention it, but where he says, the human mind, the natural seat of reason and understanding, is enfeebled by the darkening effect of inveterate vice.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's so true.
Yes. So kind of like how God gives us the illumination, our sins kind of bring about, cloudiness in our judgment, really.
Right. And I think vice or sin or bad behavior, just philosophically or religiously or with your character, I think it makes a big difference.
Yes.
Whether or not I buy into this theory of divine illumination or not, I think that there's a lot of truth in that statement.
Yes.
Do you agree?
I would.
Yeah.
And then he also says here at the end, he kind of differentiates between thoughts and beliefs, and where like a thought is a datable event. So like at one specific point, I thought that this was true, or, I thought that X was the right answer to something. A belief is a disposition, so something that you hold for a long time, something that, kind of all of your thoughts culminate to in order to shape your opinion of the world in a way.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
So, what do I think of Augustine?
Yes.
I really like Augustine.
Yeah.
I really like this kind of differentiation, between, kind of thought and faith in a way, reason and faith. Yeah. He goes into that a little bit, not as much as some of the other philosophers that we'll get here in a minute, but I do really like the idea of divine illumination. I think that's a really neat way of looking at, kind of God's influence in the world. And I really like how he adapts Plato's ideas because
yes,
like we've discussed many, many times, the ideas are not really our ideal philosophical framework, but I like how he adapts them kind of into the perfect essence of things that only exist in God's mind.
Right. And it seems like he makes Plato's theory of ideas, or whatever you want to call it, a lot more practical in a way. It's like, okay, it's not just this theoretical perfect idea. It's the divine inspiration kind of makes it for me a little bit more meaty and more practical as far as a moral philosophy too. And yeah, it's as we get closer and closer to our time, I get more and more interested in the specific philosophy of the different philosophers, just because it's a little bit more articulated probably than
Yeah.
The earlier writings from ancient Greece and all that.
I agree.
Bonaventure?
Bonaventure.
Bonaventure or
Bonaventure. I say Bonaventure.
I say Bonaventure. Tomato,
Okay.
tomato.
So he kind of adapts Augustine's ideas on illumination. He says that without faith, no one can learn of the Trinity or life after death. So he does kind of give some merit to reason, but he also says that we need faith to really understand God, to understand, religion, and basically, the biggest concepts of basically all religions. They need to focus on faith because otherwise you can't really get to the end goal purely on reason.
Well, there's some truth to that, don't you think?
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah. It's not as compelling from a philosophical argument,
Yes.
but it's good advice, I guess.
He also says that philosophical science is the way to other sciences, but he who wishes to stop there falls into darkness. So he's kind of saying, with philosophy, we can kind of branch out into all other frames of thinking about everything, basically. But if we just stop at learning about philosophy, we don't go any deeper. We kind of miss out on all of the other sciences in a way. So we have to kind of, pursue different means of understanding things. And in this, I think he kind of leans towards faith and exploring the other sciences. But I think that's very true for lots of different fields of study.
Yep. I really like, I don't know if we're ready to move on to Aquinas, but I really liked his theories as well. You a fan of Thomas Aquinas?
I am.
Are you?
Yes, I am.
More than St. Augustine or Augustine?
Probably.
Yeah.
I would say so.
Yeah, me too.
Just to wrap up Bonaventure,
I'm sorry.
yes.
I thought we were done with Bonaventure.
Well, he also kind of talks about Christian philosophers just a little bit, like Augustine did way back when, the third episode of the podcast. He says that Christian philosophers can use the arguments of philosophers to broaden their understanding of saving faith. So in this time when, some philosophers are just absolutely demonized by the church, you still have guys like this that are saying it's very, very good for Christians to learn philosophy because we can use those concepts to further our own faith. And I think that's important to mention in this time where everyone is condemned.
Yes. Not everybody.
Most people.
They always had an opportunity to recant.
Yeah, if they paid.
Paid a price.
Yeah.
Fine and had to apologize for wrong think.
Yes.
We're getting into that now, aren't we? We're laughing about these guys in the Middle Ages getting condemned and ordered into silence. Do you see any parallels to modern day United States?
I do.
We're heading this way.
Unfortunately.
Well, there's always revolution.
All right.
Just joking. We're the counter-revolutionaries.
Yes, I guess.
Conservatives are counter-revolutionaries.
Yes.
First, the left-wingers have to have the revolution, and then we have to sweep them out. And boy, we better, because they get dangerous. Because first they kill us, and then they kill each other, and then the counter-revolution can start in earnest. It's been weakened by their own fratricide.
That's really the French Revolution way of looking at things.
It's pretty much, yes, that's right.
Yes,
Yeah.
Nobody's radical enough.
Well, it's also Soviet, too.
Yes.
And then you end up just with, you either end up with an emperor like in France, or you end up with, like Stalin, just a criminal murder. Man, he's just a mass murderer. Almost impressive in his depravity.
Yes.
Really the scale of it.
Something interesting I learned just about the French Revolution.
Yeah.
Robespierre was actually a judge for some French courts, and he ruled against the death penalty for a long time for many criminals. And then, Reign of Terror.
Well, so he was mostly an attorney, and but I think he was a magistrate of some sort for some period of time, and he was against the death penalty when he was not the state. So he was always a revolutionary, and so he was consistent in that he wanted the enemies to die, I think. He had high ideals that he talked about, and so there's still people in France that think he was a great historical figure. I guess it depends on what you call a great historical figure, but certainly not a good person, and very dangerous, and then ended up being executed himself.
Interesting.
Yeah. And all the world was better for it.
Yes.
For him being executed, not for him doing everything leading up to his own
execution.
Yes. But at some point, to the guillotines.
All right, Aquinas.
But again, they start killing their enemies, and they never stop with just their enemies.
Aquinas.
Yes.
Yes. So Aquinas kind of takes a different approach to intellect. So where Augustine was saying, not to intellect, to illumination, where Augustine says that illumination is only granted through God, Aquinas says that intellect is really this providing light to us to understand concepts, and it turns potential thinkable concepts into actual thinkable concepps. And this intellect is within the human soul, so it's part of our human nature. It's not, this illumination isn't something that we can only be granted through God. It is something that is within all of us.
Well, isn't he saying that it was granted to us when we were conceived?
Yes, it is.
And then it's ours.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's kind of part of God in the same way that everything else is created by God.
Right.
But if we say that, all of nature is created by God in the same way that we say that intellect is created by God, then everything becomes supernatural and nothing really, kind of blurs the line between natural and supernatural.
Right.
So that's kind of where he's saying that it's, it's a natural thing and not a supernatural thing, because it's not. You look confused.
Well, I think he's still saying that it's supernatural, but it's part of the human.
But it isn't supernatural because it's part of human nature.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah,
so it isn't supernatural.
Right. I get what you're saying. I apologize.
Yes. And so this concept of agent intellect is really his big deal here. He says that knowledge is gained from sense perception and agent intellect. And this is really this concept-forming capacity this agent intellect is. And it is itself a reflection of divine illumination. So kind of we're going back into the, ideas about reflections of things and how, sense perceptions, that sort of thing. But in this way, the reason, intellect, gives us the ability to provide that illumination is because it is itself a reflection of the image of God. So it is part of our human nature. It's still natural to us. But it does, give us that illumination in a similar way that God would give that divine illumination, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what do you think of that?
I kind of like that.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
So how's that? That just differs from St. Augustine in what way? That it's within us as opposed to an external source.
Yes.
But it's provided to us when we're born or conceived or whatever.
Conceived, yes.
Yeah, I like that better. There's always that there's a dynamic of... Well, I guess we're not really talking about soul. We're talking about the mind, I guess, though. How the mind or the supernatural side of us interacts with the physical side. It's always an interesting discussion, but for another day.
Yes. He also does kind of go back into that supernatural intellect a little bit, and he says, he kind of defines that supernatural intellect as grace, and that is our ability to understand really things that we cannot determine with through reason, things such as like, the resurrection of Jesus and kind of like the nature of God. There's really no natural way for us to discover things to an extent. And so that's kind of where we get that grace, that divine revelation to really understand those faith mysteries. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then moving on to Aquinas on faith, knowledge, and science.
Yes. This I liked.
Yes, I really like this. He said that natural reason can achieve a limited number of truths about God, but some doctrines are known only by revelation. So this is kind of natural versus revealed theology, and this is kind of what I was talking about just a second ago with grace, in that we can use our intellect and our reason to kind of understand certain facts about God. We can provide some truths, but to an extent, there are some parts of our faith that are just unknowable without revelation, and that's where we get that revealed theology as opposed to the natural theology.
Right.
He also says that belief in God is presupposed by faith. And this is something that I really agree with, is that you kind of have to believe in God before you get into any of the teachings of faith. And this is kind of where I think a lot of my Catholic school education has kind of failed a little bit. Because, in all of our time in our theology classes and everything, we've never really been given good reasons for why God should exist. And so we're kind of being taught all these things about how we should live our lives according to God taught us. And I know there's just a lot of people in my class who just do not care what God has taught us because they do not think that God exists.
Really?
Yes.
Name some names.
I'm not naming any names.
And that's a problem.
Yes.
And that's a problem to try to teach religion to people who don't believe in God. I think that's an initial first step.
Yes.
That probably should have been first semester.
Yes. I think it was mentioned briefly freshman year, kind of some of the basic proofs for God's existence. Like I think we touched on Thomas Aquinas's 5 ways a little bit, but we moved on very, very quickly.
You know what's really good is a book, I've got it at my office, The Case for Christ. I think it's Case for Christ. It's written by a former atheist, I think a lawyer, and basically lays out arguments for, well, number one, Jesus' existence, and then number 2, for him being the Son of God. It's very good. Have you ever read it?
Mm-mm.
I'll have to bring it home for you.
We have gotten kind of some of those similar things where it's like evidence for historical Bible events like happening.
Right.
Like we've kind of gotten like the same thing for like Jesus in a way, and then so many people proclaim that he existed.
Well, he definitely lived.
Yes.
I don't think. Well, I mean, no rational person is denying that he lived. The question is he God or is he the Son?
So I don't know if that was necessarily proven enough, but things like Old Testament stories, like there's evidence for a great flood way back when, but at the same time, there's so many world mythologies that also talk about a great flood, and so we don't really get those proofs for why the Catholic view on things is correct as opposed to other views.
What they should do as a first step is to, number one, show the students the evidence that Jesus actually lived.
Yes.
And I think that's really, I think your point is absolutely correct, because it's all theory and it's all Bible stories. It's almost like kids' books or mythology or something. If you don't put it on the get into the granular details of it at some point, you're losing people.
Yeah. Because right now we're learning about vocation, really, and like how to kind of choose our path in life.
Somehow I think those atheists are not going to choose a vocation.
Yes. Well, vocation is more than just married, religious, that sort of thing. It's kind of like basically how you take your steps in life, and we're kind of learning about discernment. How to find our path through prayer and that sort of thing. And I'm just thinking, like, does any of this matter to people who don't think that God exists?
Correct.
And the bottom line is, it just completely doesn't, and it's just a waste of their time.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's right.
Unfortunate, yes.
I think you should share that with your instructor.
I would, except I will not be at school tomorrow, and that's when I have that class.
Oh, well, you don't have to do it tomorrow.
Yes, I'll do it Thursday then. Okay. That's when I have that class next. Yes.
Yeah, I have more than one class.
Yes. No, this is it for the whole year.
Yeah.
I haven't missed this class. There's no more.
All right, what are you going to talk about next? Because I had some thoughts a little bit later in this thing.
I'm still in this section on Aquinas. He says that faith depends on supernatural reason, but opinion rests on everyday evidence. This is kind of where he makes this distinction between, what is faith and what is opinion, because a lot of the time, you can kind of pass off religion as kind of just a matter of opinion. Just kind of
skipped over something I really liked. Are you on page 383?
I believe so.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not following along. I just have my notes here in my hand.
I really liked, and it's a little arrogant, not on my part, but his.
Oh, I think I know exactly what you're talking about.
What he's talking about, here, I'll just quote from Kenny's book. To establish them, being these proofs for God or your religion and all that, to establish them by philosophical argument demands more intelligence, leisure, and energy than can be expected from a majority of humankind. And I think that's so true. And his defense to that is basically, you can have faith and you can believe in God, but not everybody has the time, the leisure, the inclination, or sometimes the intellectual capacity to really articulate a complicated proof for the existence of God. Yeah. And that's okay. I think there's so many people that are arrogant agnostics or arrogant atheists that say, well, you can't prove that God exists. Well, not every single believer has to prove it in detail in a theorem. Just because this person can't articulate it doesn't mean it isn't true. And I really like that, and that resonated with me. Even though it sounds arrogant, it sounds like only us, inspired, intelligent people like Thomas Aquinas can rationalize or articulate why God exists because we are smarter than other people. But I think really he's saying is that not everybody has to prove it. It doesn't denigrate their faith or their belief or prove that they're wrong just because they can't articulate a complicated argument for the existence of God or their faith. Mm-hmm. I thought that was very good.
Yes, I think it's very fascinating. I think it's a very good point.
Yeah.
Back to what I was saying about...
In defense of the morons.
Back to what I was saying about the difference between faith and opinion. So kind of like I was saying, too often kind of religion is passed off as a matter of opinion, just kind of like what you think happens and that sort of thing. And he kind of says, well, faith is based on the supernatural revelation in a way, combined with our reason, combined with things that have been revealed to people. We can kind of understand, what happens after death, the nature of God. Whereas, matters of opinion, such as things like, I like this certain food, that's completely different because that's based on, when I eat this food, it tastes good. That is your opinion. And it's completely different from faith.
Yes.
Yes. I was waiting for some sort of comment there, and you just kind of looked blankly at me.
I don't know. I didn't need a comment on that.
Yes.
Good.
Yes. All right.
Good explanation.
Thank you. He also says that our ability to grasp and exercise self-evident principles is the primary gift of intellect. So kind of this ability for us to grasp things that, we don't really have reason leading up to is our gift of intellect. They are kind of the baseline for all reason, and that is really what we use our intellect for.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's accurate. And
yes.
A very good articulated argument for said concept.
He also defines this ability as ratio, this reasoning faculty, the power to deduce conclusions from self-evident principles. So kind of how we build our understanding of things based on these self-evident, underlying principles that we can't really articulate for why they are correct.
Correct.
Yes. Is this just going to be the format from now on? I explain a philosophical teaching and you go, yes.
Yes, that's correct. That is exactly what I don't know. What do you want me to say? I mean, we're kind of in a very technical, arguments about the extent of our knowledge.
Yeah, so the last thing I want to mention about Aquinas is he kind of defines science. He says the task of science is completed when deductions are traced back to the first principles. So he's kind of saying, like, through observation, like we can gather data, and that's really our primary observation. That's kind of our self-evident principle because I noticed this thing out in the wild, or I noticed this through this sort of experiment in a way, and now I can kind of reason through that. I can build up deductions on how that thing works, but really the science is only completed when we can trace all of those deductions back down to that primary self-evident thing.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Let's go to Duns Scotus.
Duns Scotus, the epistemology of Duns Scotus.
It was epistemology.
You did not like this section.
I don't know why I didn't. I mean, I was kind of glazing over my eyes on Duns Scotus. Yeah. I didn't really understand what his contribution was.
I think I kind of understand
it. We'll give it to me in 2 minutes.
All right. So he believed primarily that intellect is powerful enough to include all things finite and infinite, but it is kind of restricted in its certainty. So we cannot really, through our intellect, we cannot prove anything for certain, really. But we do have the ability to understand things kind of beyond our observation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know if that's anything different than anybody else said.
Well, I mean, with other philosophers are basically saying there are some things that are certain. There are some things that are self-evident that we find through our intellect. And he's saying, well, we as humans are kind of flawed in a way, and that our intellect, while we can grasp these big ideas, we cannot really prove anything for certain. At least I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah, so then he's kind of skeptical, isn't he?
A little bit. He also says that knowledge involves the presence in the mind of a representation of its object. So for us to be able to understand the concept of something, we kind of have to have the idea of something in our mind. And so this is kind of where he also differs from the previous philosophers, because we really, they were kind of saying, we have these perfect ideas of things that only exist in God's mind, and that's kind of how we come to know them. But he's saying, well, those kind of just exist in the minds of anyone with intellect.
Right.
So for us to, understand the concept of a perfect circle, that's just something that we understand in our own heads, and we don't really need any divine reasoning to find that.
True.
He also defines the different types of cognition.
This is longer than 2 minutes.
And those two types are abstractive and intuitive. And so abstractive cognition is knowledge of the essence of an object, basically. And so that's what I was kind of saying. By visualizing it in your mind, it's not something that you can physically hold. You don't really have it in existence, but it's abstractive in that it is in our mind. And you have intuitive, and that is present in its existence. So this intuitive cognition is, looking at the things around us through our senses and coming to knowledge through that means.
How do you really know the difference?
Well, it's like I can say there's a book over there, and that is intuitive. And then abstractive.
That's a book. It's a concept of a book. How is that different?
Because the abstractive concepts are basically like the ideas. So it's like I can point to a circle over there. There's a circle on that speaker.
Yes.
But that's not really the perfect circle. But I know that it is a circle because I have the abstractive cognition of a circle within my mind, and I know what a circle is, basically, without having to see a circle in front of me.
Okay.
You seem less than invested in this section.
I am not. Yeah, I don't see how that.
Well, lucky for you, it continues.
Oh no,
with Occam.
Oh yeah, Occam.
Yeah, Occam.
Yeah,
yes,
we're moving on to Occam.
yes.
You like Occam?
I do like Occam.
Yeah, I don't know.
I like
why.
his concept of mental. That's fun.
Mental.
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 The language inside your head.
Yes.
Yes. I like that.
All right, moving right on.
So intuitive and abstractive knowledge in Occam. So he says, first and foremost, that we apprehend all kinds of thoughts without assenting to them, but we cannot assent without apprehension. So this is kind of the difference between, judgment and just knowledge of something.
Yes.
So like I can make points about something, I can argue a case for something, but that does not necessarily mean that I can make a judgment on it or that, I have, kind of the correct opinion on things, but I can attest to the fact that I have knowledge of it. Whereas judgment, you have to have that knowledge before you can make that judgment, before you can make that assent.
Yes.
Yes. All right. And so knowledge really involves both. You cannot have knowledge. I shouldn't have said knowledge in my definition there. You can have facts and data about things with your apprehension, but you cannot have full knowledge of a thing without making a judgment about it and without apprehension of it.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And so he kind of puts up a different variation on abstractive intuition, or abstractive cognition and intuitive cognition, because he says abstractive is really not dependent on a thing existing, and intuitive is dependent on a thing existing. So an intuitive cognition would be me saying there is a star in the sky. And so that fact is...
if you see the star.
That fact is dependent on there being a star in the sky.
That is correct.
And that can be proven false if the star miraculously disappears. But I can say that you think there is a star in the sky.
Just thought it.
Yes, and I can say that, and that is not dependent on there being a star in the sky. You can think there's a star in the sky all you want, and that is...
Just did.
Thank you. And that is... Thank you for providing an example to our audience.
Yes.
Right. Clarifying that you did that. And so whether or not there is a star in the sky at all, it is still true that you think that there is. And that's that is the difference between abstractive and intuitive.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I helped you with that lesson.
Yes, you really did. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, these last two didn't seem to really, to me, to bring anything more to this discussion, or much more to the discussion, other than, again, language.
Yes.
It's just a different way to describe the, I think, very similar concepts. They're just using slightly different language and different terms. And
I think it's interesting.
oh yeah,
But I will be majoring in linguistics when I go to college.
That's
so
what you say when you get there. Oof, I don't know.
But
I never intended to major in philosophy.
Really?
Yeah.
What were you? Oh yeah, I guess you just went in undecided, didn't you?
Well, I was undecided the entire time. But then I had enough credits to get a degree, and so they gave me a degree.
so you just took a bunch of...
and so like in college, in way back when, you'd declare a major, and then you'd have to see an advisor, and that advisor would say these are the classes, these are the course requisites. So you'd have to have an advisor sign off on your course schedule in order to get registered. I don't know if they still do it that way. If they do, it would be electronically. But back in my day, it was paper and pen.
Yes.
And so you had to meet with somebody in person and all that. But if you were undeclared, you were an undeclared major, and they had like these cattle calls that they would just have open office hours for you to go in and you say, hey, look, I want to sign up for these classes. And they'd check to make sure you have the prerequisites, but they wouldn't check to see if you're advancing towards any degree because you're undecided. What are you going to do? You're just taking classes. And so I knew what the catalog was. I knew what the requirements were. And so I could just go in, bam, and sign up. And I wouldn't have to wait in line. And I was undecided the entire time.
Yes.
But once I got enough credits that last semester, I think I might have had to declare to get the degree because you had to fill out a form to get the degree to show that you had everything in there. But
Gotcha.
anyway, so that's
Yes.
But when I went in, I was tested out of college algebra, so I took calculus. I don't know if I took. I didn't. We did not have college credit calculus in my high school.
Well, we do.
So I think I took
fun.
it again. I took it the second time in undergrad, and didn't apply myself, and it was work. And I took some other science classes. I took a computer science class, and it was work. But I took a philosophy class, and I'm like, I could just say whatever I want. and I realized quickly that if you want to get an A, and this is advice for you if you take a philosophy class, if you want to get an A in a philosophy class, probably applies to psychology too. Figure out what the professor believes in and write a great defense for their belief system so that they will probably steal it from you and publish a paper on it or whatever. And you're going to get an A. Because if you can articulate their point of view as good or better than them, they're going to give you an A. However, if you just do a half-assed job of doing the opposite argument, they'll respect you for your independent point of view, and they won't really know that argument very well because they don't consider opposing points of view when you're in academia. And so they'll be like, oh, this is kind of interesting. But then they'll refute it, so they'll give you a B. But you don't have to spend a whole lot of time on it. You just have to have a reasonable argument against whatever their position is on that topic, and you'll get a B. So you can do C-level work and get a B.
What's the grade you get if you really, really defend their opposing view?
Their opposing view? You can never get higher than a B.
Okay.
Unless you convince them you're right, but that's never going to happen. So you have to either go with them and do as good as them or better on their argument. You get an A.
Didn't you spend the majority of your classes arguing with your professors?
Not all of them. Not all of them.
Not all of them?
Just mainly one. I think it was metaphysics. I thought we talked about this on a previous
I don't think we've talked about it here.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I mean, he was what you call a soft determinist, and
we have mentioned this, yes.
Yeah. So he would argue every class period about soft determinism and how it's the right theory, and then there's always a way to argue that the thing that is the free will portion of the argument was really caused by some other cause, some other prior cause, and he couldn't get around it, and he just kept coming back to it. It's frustrating. But I mean, they're actually pretty good professors back then. I don't know, what the philosophy department looks like at UMSL now, but they're actually pretty good. Back when I was there, most of them. I enjoyed it. It was easy. Got a degree, and everybody used to ask me. They're going to ask you. They're going to ask you every time at Christmas. So, what's your major in? Even though you told them like at Easter. Linguistics. And they're like, linguistics? What are you going to do with that?
Not much.
So when I was dating your mother, we met when I was 20. And so I was, so I was an undergrad, and I was a philosophy major. And, her family, of course, they want to know if I'm going to be able to take care of this gal, if it's serious, when she started bringing me around the family, especially Aunt Wendy. And Aunt Wendy said, so what are you going to do with this philosophy degree? And so eventually I just said, well, I'm going to be a street philosopher. I said, but I think my day job will be like an assistant night manager at 7-Eleven. They'll give me the freedom to be a street philosopher. And like, street philosopher, what is that? I said, you go to the park, you dress up kind of funny, and you start spouting off about all your philosophies. So I did that more along with my family than with the soon-to-be in-laws.
Yes.
Although I courted your mother for like 6 years before we got married.
Wow.
We met, 5 years, 5.5. Met in 91, and they got married in 96.
Yes.
I'll tell you the full story of how I met your mother when you're 21.
Oh, okay.
So maybe if we're still podcasting, we'll have a How I Met Your Mother.
Well, looking at how long this book is, I think we will be.
These really 3 books,
yes.
4 or whatever, this compilation.
All right. Well, this has been unlimited
Wait,
opinions.
I want to tell some more stories about my college years.
You can go ahead.
No, I was just joking.
You can follow us on Twitter and tweet at us to get a free shirt.
I will design it myself.
That's
We can be autographed shirts. Now you don't want to do that because, well, unless you do it in some sort of ink that doesn't wash out.
Yeah.
But you never want to get an autographed shirt unless you're going to put it in a frame because you can't wash it.
I think our listeners will frame an autograph from us. I think we're high class celebrities.
No.
Yes.
Our listener wants to wear the shirt. Get it dirty.
Ugh. But yeah, you can tweet at us at capital U, lowercase LMTD, capital O opinions. I've been Adam Bishop.
I am Mark Bishop.
So what's the shirt gonna look like?
Oh, well, I guess we'll use the logo.
Oh, I guess so.
And then on the back, it has to have some smart-ass comment like, your opinion is wrong. You know.
That sounds great.
Yes.